and I squint. I look at the subject and I take a good hard squint and I try to see the shape simply. And when I squint, this whole thing just seems to be in shadow, except for a little spot right in here that's getting hit with some light. Again, like I did earlier with the brush, when I was initially blocking in, I'm doing the same thing with a relatively dry brush. And I'm scraping with the hope to get a nice texture on that edge. What I don't paint, in this case, becomes the lighter part of that tree. Right? And I block that right up to the edge of the red tree, and it seems to stop because the red tree in that part is in light. All right. Now, here's what I've been doing lately, and I think it works out really well. Not only do the sprinkling with the water thing, I also want to make, if I leave that alone, the color has a tendency to dry too evenly, and it looks like a gouache painting.
Yeah.
Gouache painting is watercolor with white added, and I don't want that look. I want it to look thin and transparent. So what I've been doing lately is I've been taking a little bit of clean water, and somewhere in the shadow, not necessarily the middle, but somewhere in the shadow, I make it a little lighter. I take a little drop of water and I put a little drop in here so part of the shadow lightens up a little bit. And I do this other thing with the sprinkles in a moment too, is I hit it so that parts of the shadow dry a little lighter. So we have the paint thins out, then it thickens up. I even like the way it collects and puddles in the area, and that usually tends to dry a little thicker. It looks more transparent. If I block that color in all green, it comes in too evenly and it looks wrong. It doesn't look like watercolor. But by the addition of a little drop of water in the middle, it looks like a reflected plane. It looks like some of the leaves are a little lighter within the shadow, which they are. But more importantly, it thins the media out so that it looks more watercolory. Okay. So now I also want to do a halftone. So I take some clean water, and on the edge of the shadow that faces the light, just hit a couple spots here and there where we soften up some of the shadow. But I don't want to soften up everything. I just want a couple spots here and there so the form turns a little bit. I think it looks pretty good. I think it's going to dry well. All right. So the shadow seems to go down into here. All right. Sometimes the other thing that I like to do too is I like to take the same green, and you might even notice a branch or two. So I take a thin script liner brush. And then you're going to say, well, that branch isn't green. It isn't, but it doesn't have to be. It'll still be dark enough to look like a branch. And if I really need to, maybe I'll glaze a little red in there. But it's nice to have a little branch or two kind of sticking out. And because it's around the same value as that dark branch, it'll look like a. The viewer doesn't necessarily have to know that it was made with green. And if it really still bothers you at the end of the painting, glaze a little red on the branch, and you'll be just fine. All right, so I block in my green shadow color in here. Again, I'll do the same thing with the water. Just put a little drop of water in the middle of it, maybe do the sprinkle thing. Now, before I go to the red tree, let's hit this whole cluster, and I want to talk about negative painting. So I am going to be painting the shadow on this tree right in here, but at the same time, I'm also going to be painting the edge of the tree in the light. So I have to do a little negative painting. Right now I'm doing positive painting, right? This whole area in here. Look how much liquid I had in the brush. You see I wasn't able to get a nice scrape because the brush was too loaded with paint. So I want to get rid of some of the water. I want to use more of a relatively dry brush technique. The shadow seems to go up into here a little bit. I'm trying to squint and try to see the major shapes of the shadow. I can take my script liner brush, maybe paint a branch or two coming out. Scrape the brush on the side for the texture. A lot of shadow in this area. Usually where you see a hole in a tree, it's usually surrounded by a lot of shadow. So all these sky holes, for the most part, generally speaking, should be surrounded by shadow because you are really looking into the tree in order to see the other side. The leaves get sparse in that area. So you're likely to see all the way through the tree, all the way to the sky, so you'll see a shadow underplane in there. So wherever you see a hole, there's usually some shadow from the tree. All right, and my tree Now I have to pay a little bit more attention to what I'm doing with, with the shadow shape. Because not only am I painting the shadow on that grouping of trees, but I'm also painting the light side on that tree. So I have to think negatively. It was a big day for me when I figured that out for myself. That what I am not painting becomes just as important as what I am painting. I am not painting the edge of that tree. Do you get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't get it.
I am painting the light side of this tree, but at the same time I'm also painting the light part of that tree. That's negative painting. That's all I mean.
I'm painting the dark side of the
So
tree.
in order for him to be able to define the shape of that light green,
He's creating
I'm doing two things at once right now.
Oh, I see.
All right, I'm
Okay.
painting the shadow on that tree, but also at the same time I'm
Oh.
painting the lighter edge of that tree. That's called negative thinking. That's called negative painting. It is hard. It is really a hard thing to do correctly. And you're kind of doing two things at once. And we're always taught to think positively, and it's a funny concept. It's so true, right? They even write books about it, the power of positive thinking. But in
Power of
painting,
negative.
yeah, the power of negative. I always say if I ever write a watercolor book, that'd be the title.
But aren't you painting positive the tree that you're painting?
What's that?
But you are painting the tree that you're painting
Yeah.
positively.
I'm painting positively, but I am painting that tree negatively, right?
And you're thinking of both at the same time.
Exactly.
yeah, which
Okay.
Yep.
is so
And that's a bit, that's a weird concept, especially when we see things, and if you come to watercolor with another painting background, like an oil painting background, it's really hard to, although oil painters and pastel painters, they have to think negatively too, All right, so my wash in here is nice and solid, too solid. Look how nicely that lighter valley is
Yeah.
dried, right?
Big
So
difference.
let's do a couple things, right? Let's find a couple spots where we could thin the paint out with some clean water. And then I also want to take some clean water and do the spritzer, do the spritzer thing. I think it's better if you have a little spritzer bottle.
You think, but that's a fine spray though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can find a spritzer bottle that shoots the water out a little more in globs. And the other thing is a couple halftones on this tree. In a couple places here and there. Don't overdo the halftones. You don't want a tree that looks like it's been made out of Play-Doh. We want to have some of the texture on that edge too, right? If I soften everything up, it doesn't look like it's leafy. It looks gummy. It looks like big globs of, it looks like, it doesn't look like it's a tree texture. So, but you do want a couple soft edges here and there, and those little soft edges help turn the form. I think I have a nice shape on my tree in here, and I think I did a nice negative painting. Now, this tree is a little lighter, I said, than the other green tree that I put in earlier. So I want my shadow to be a little lighter. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow, a little more water. So the shadow that I'm going to put on this tree is not going to be quite as dark as that tree. So, and this is what I've mixed. And now I got to paint the shadow on this tree. And again, with the texture, scrape the brush on the side. The light source is coming in from this direction, so I have a hunch that there would be the shadow, on this side of the tree. And then again, do the same thing with the clean water. Hit a couple halftones, but leave some hard edges at the same time. And then, just drop a little water within the shadow. I like that. It's a nice shape.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Right? Now, let's go to the red tree and talk about that in a moment, right? We're not going to use the greens, obviously, on a red tree. That would be